So, welcome back. This is lesson 3. It's multiplying and dividing polynomials. I already kind of warmed you up to be able to approach this particular lesson from the project. So, what we do when we're addressing multiplying or dividing polynomials is we only do like with like. So, numbers with numbers, right? But when it comes to variables, if we are multiplying two variables, for multiplying variables, we add exponents. And if we're dividing variables, we subtract exponents. And always, in order to make exponents negative, you make exponents, we want them to be positive actually. So make them positive, make positive exponents. You switch sides. So we switch sides. So let's say I have a to the negative 1. I want this to be a positive exponent, so it becomes 1 over a to the 1 power. If I had, let's say, a to the negative 1 divided by b squared over c to the negative 3, then I would switch things around here, but b would stay in place because the exponent's positive. So I would end up with c cubed divided by ab squared. Okay, so make positive exponents, that's the deal. If we're dividing variables, we're subtracting exponents on those variables. If we're multiplying variables, we're adding exponents on those variables. So, part by part, number 1, 4 divided by 2 is just 2. Okay, now I have x squared on top, x on the bottom, that's x to the 2 minus 1. So I always take away from the bigger number. And then y is bigger on the bottom, so I take away from the bigger exponent on the bottom. Simplified, that gives me 2x over y squared. Number 2, I have z to the 1 on top, z to the 1 on bottom, x to the 1 as well. So that's z to the 1 minus 1 on top, and x to the 1 on the bottom. Simplified, that's z to the 0 over x to the 1, or just 1 over x. That's the process. I could have skipped a lot of steps, but we need to understand what we're addressing when we have the 0 exponent. So it's kind of a review. So next, they're multiplying two things, but what we're going to do is to address the stuff on the top and then address the stuff on the bottom and then kind of combine to cancel out. So I have 10, okay, 10 over 5 times 3. Then I have z to the 1 plus 2. We're multiplying those things on the top. And then I have z to the 6th. I'm just part by part putting things together. And then I have x to the 1 on the bottom. So I took care of each individual type of term. So let's go through. This cancels, becomes 2. 10 divided by 5 is 2. So I get 2 over 3 here. I have z to the cube on top, z to the 6 on the bottom. I'm going to take 3 away from here at the bottom. And then I have 1 over x. Simplified, I get 2/3 over z to the 3rd x. Okay? All right, so next problem. It's going to be a little bit easier now. All right, so at this point, we know we're combining things together. So what I like to do, maybe it makes it easier to see. Maybe you don't have to do this, but just put things together that look like they belong together. So numbers with numbers, variable terms or expressions with expressions. So 2 times the quantity of x plus 2. And what we'll find is that 4 divided by 2 is just 2. And these two cancel out. I didn't even have to distribute. It just cancels out. And my final answer is right here. Maybe we could have skipped that step, but we didn't. All right? Now, what happens when we divide? You have to remember, you flip the second fraction. Flip the second fraction. And then multiply. And then multiply. Okay? That's the rule. So if I have 1/2 divided by 3/2, I flip the fraction. It becomes 2/3. This is a reciprocal. And what happens? I have 1 times 2 over 3 times 2. And maybe you can't see it, but you could have just canceled there. But we can cancel these 2's here. And we're left with 1/3. So let's try skipping this step next time if we come to it. Next, we have 10 times x over 4y, right? We flip the other fraction. We've put 5 x's on top and 2y squareds on the bottom. And now we're just doing a little bit of combining and some work here. Okay? So we could put the numbers in our calculator, or we could just go ahead and divide out. 10 divided by 2 is, I am left with 5 there. 5 times 5, 5 times 5 over 4. And then for my x's, I have x squared. So I have x to the 1, x to the 1. 1 plus 1 is 2, so x squared. On the bottom, I have y to the 1 and y squared. So that's 3 of those. Simplified, I have 25 x squared over y to the 3rd. Okay? Now, we're going to be simplifying, multiplying, and dividing rational expressions. So a rational expression is simplified when the numerator and the denominator have no common factors other than 1. So I can't divide anything else out except for 1. Remember that you can only divide out common factors and not necessarily common variables. So for example, whereas I could say x over x equals 1, I can't just cancel out of x here for this particular problem, okay? This is a simplified version of this problem. This is a simplified version of this, but you can't divide out of x. You can't just say that that's equal to something else. That's the most simplified form of that fraction on the bottom. Now, basic examples, we can cancel out like expressions. We're left with x minus 2 here. Over here, cancel out expressions. When I divide out expressions and I have nothing else that's on the top, you put a 1 there. And you're left with equals 1 over x minus 4. Next, I have 2 x's on the bottom, 1 on the top, so I can take 1 away and I'm left with that 1x on the bottom. This simplifies to x plus 5 divided by x. Next, if I simplify this any further, this is what would happen. I would have x squared over x plus 3 over x. Now, have 1 on the bottom, taking 1 away, so I'm left with 1x on the top, plus 3 over x. If you notice, I could not get rid of the x that was under the 3. Now, a rational expression is simplified when the numerator and the denominator have no common factors other than 1. Why am I repeating this? Because you have to. You have to get this in your head. Remember that you can only divide out common factors. You cannot necessarily divide out variables. Okay? So next, what we're going to have to do is factor the expression at the top. We're looking for two numbers that multiply to 6 and add up to -5. So they multiply to 6, add up to -5. I already know -2 and -3. So at the top, x minus 2 times x minus 3 divided by the quantity of x plus 2 times x minus 3. It's easy to see what my factors are. The final answer here is x minus 2 divided by x plus 2. Okay? Next, we're doing a little bit of factoring. Okay, so we're looking for two numbers that multiply to -24, add up to 2. That's going to be x plus 6 times x minus 4. On the bottom, difference of two squares, x plus 4 times x minus 4. Factors cancel. I'm left with x plus 6 divided by x plus 4 as my final answer. Next, factoring out the greatest common factor here, and we have 3c times the quantity of 3 divided by 6 is 2c's plus 3. Okay, on the bottom I have 3c's. These 3c's cancels, and I'm left with 2c plus 3 as my final answer. Number 8, I have 3x squared divided by, my greatest common factor coming out of there for the numbers is 3. Greatest common factor for variables is x. X divided by x cubed, I'm left with x squared. Plus 21 divided by 3 is 7. X divided by x is nothing. Simplifying, this goes away. I'm left with 1 and x at the top. That leaves me with x over x squared plus 7. And that's all I can do there. All right. Next, what I can do is when my x is negative, remember I said you pull out a negative and everything inside changes. So I pull out a negative. I have x minus 2. Pull out a -1, and 2 becomes -2. X becomes positive x. If I switch these around, I have x minus 2, -1, parentheses, x minus 2. These cancel, and I'm left with -1. So you be cautious, you be careful. On the bottom here, number 10, I'm going to have to take a negative out, so this becomes -1, negative, positive, -3 plus x. Okay? Now I'm going to switch that around when I get the factors here. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to -15, add up to 2, so that's x plus 5 times x minus 3. At the bottom, I have that -1, parentheses, x minus 3. This goes away. I'm left with negative x plus 5. That -1 comes up. And if I distribute, I have -x minus 5. All the signs change inside. Okay? Next, I have two numbers that multiply to 14. So I have x minus 7 on top, x plus 2 as well. On the bottom, the factors are 3 and 2, so x minus 3 times x plus 2. This goes away. I'm left with x minus 7 times divided by x minus 3. And if you notice, I just dropped the parentheses when I got to that point. Next, number 12. I have up top, when you factor that out, x plus 4 times x plus 4. On the bottom, I have the quantity of x minus 6 times x plus 4. One of these expressions cancel out on the top and bottom, and I'm left with x plus 4 divided by x minus 6. If you're still struggling with factoring, please go back and look at the factoring video. So when we're multiplying rational expressions, we want to follow directions and factor the numerators and the denominators, cancel common factors, multiply, check to see if you can simplify further. So clearly I can go through, cancel out those common factors on the top and the bottom. X minus 5 cancels out here and here. And I think that's it. So I have x minus 2 times x plus 5 over x plus 1. So I want to simplify the top part. So I have x squared minus 2x's. And then x squared minus 2x's, and then 5x, positive 5x, minus 10 over x plus 1. Combine like terms, I get x squared plus 3x minus 10 over x plus 1. Final answer. So we did a lot of work here, sort of. We canceled out common factors, and then we multiplied the two binomials. Okay? So next one, I have 3x minus 5 cancels out, and then the x cubed takes away all three of those, and you're left with 1x up here. And then I simplify. I have 3 left on the top and 5 minus 9x on the bottom. If you wanted to take the negative out, you could also write negative 3, and this switches around. You have negative 5 plus 9x. You could flip it, switch it around, and take a negative out of the top and bottom, and just pull your negative to the side. Now, 15, factoring. I have x minus 6 times x minus 8 right there. On the bottom, I have x times the quantity of x minus 6 times 1 over 3 times x minus 8. All right. Now, top to bottom, these cancel and these cancel. I'm left with, numbers always come first, 1 over 3x is my final answer here. Next, for 16, I'm going to factor the top part. So if 4x factors out, it's my greatest common factor. I'm left with x minus 1. On the bottom, I have x minus 3, no, plus 3 times x minus 1 times, on the other side, x plus 3 times x minus 2 over 4 times x. All right, part by part, 4x's cancels, x minus 1's cancel, and x plus 3's cancel. I'm left with x minus 2 on the top and nothing on the bottom. That's my final answer. So if you can get to the point where you're factoring, everything is smooth sailing, sort of, from there, okay? So number 17, we're going to factor this first. It's a difference of 2 squares, so x plus 3 times x minus 3. On the bottom, I'm going to go back and do that. On the top, I'm going to go back and do that as well. And I'm going to slide and divide those particular equations. So I'm going to do those below. I'm going to deal with those below. So I have 12x squared minus 13x minus 14. And I'm going to see if I can slide and divide these particular equations. So first, I have to get 12 times 14. So I'm going to grab my calculator, and you should as well. Put it in. You get 12 times 14, and it's 168. So this becomes x squared minus 13x minus 168. Okay. Now I'm looking for two factors that are going to make this, that are going to add up to 13. It's obviously not going to be 12 and 14. So I'm just going to go through the factors of 168. So two factors that multiply to negative 168. They add up to negative 13, right? So 1 and 168 would not work because I would get negative 167. 2 and let's see, negative 84 wouldn't work. That would be negative 82. Let's see, 168 and 3, that's not a factor. Let's see if 4 is a factor. 4 is a factor. So 168 divided by 4 is 42. And that wouldn't work. Okay. 168 divided by 6 is 28. So 6, negative 28. Well, negative 28 plus 6 is negative 22. So we'll keep going. We'll try 167. So I have 7 and negative 24. Well, 24 minus 7 is negative 17. So if I keep going, the next number would be 8. So 168 divided by 8, I get 21. So 8 and negative 21. And here are my factors. All right, so I have this equals x plus 8 times x minus 21. I divide that 12 back out of each side, and I'm left with a fraction. I have x plus, let's see, 2 over 3 over here. This slides over, becomes 3x. Let me bring this down a little bit here. 3x plus 2, right? On this side, we get simplified x minus 7 over 4. This swings over, becomes 4x minus 7. So we completed that side. So the quantities of 3x plus 2 times the quantity of 4x minus 7. All right, now we're ready to factor that other equation we have there, and that is 4x to the 4th plus 5x cubed minus 21x squared. So I'm going to take my greatest common factor out first, and that greatest common factor is x squared. So I'm left with 4x squared plus 5x minus 21. And now I'm going to slide and divide. So x squared plus 5x minus 84. And I'm looking for two numbers. They multiply to negative 84. And they add up to positive 5. So I always start with 1 and the number that it's associated with. So it's going to be a negative 1. It's going to be a smaller number that's negative. And this gives me 83. I'll try negative 2 next. 84 divided by 2 is 42. 42 minus 2 is just 40, so that doesn't work. I'm going to try 3, negative 3. 84 divided by negative 3 is 21. 21 minus 3 is it's 18. So I'll try 4. Try the number 4, right? And 84 divided by 4. Oh, I think I did that last one wrong. I apologize. Here we go. There we go. Let's fix that. 84 divided by 3 is 28. So 28 minus 3 is 25. So that doesn't work anyways. And then 81 divided by 4 is 21. So I made my mistake there. 21 minus 4 is 17. And is that the number we're looking for? No, it's not. So we'll move on to 7. And so we have negative 7 and 12. And 12 minus 7 is 5. So that works. So my factors here would be x minus 7 times x plus 12. And since I started off by multiplying, sliding that 4 over and multiplying, I need to divide it back first and then slide whatever's left over. So this is just going to slide automatically because I can't simplify that fraction. On the other hand, this becomes x plus 3 over here, and there's nothing to slide. So I have 4x minus 7 times x plus 3 on the top here. And on the bottom, factoring out that x, I'm left with x parentheses x minus 3. All right, and now I can go back and look at what cancels. This cancels, okay, 4x minus 7 cancels, and that's all that cancels. I'm going to erase the stuff at the bottom here, and I'm going to simplify from there. I'm just going to rearrange and simplify from there. So I have x plus 3 times the quantity of x plus 3 divided by 3x plus 2. And if I combine those two polynomials, if I multiply the two polynomials, I get x squared plus 3x plus 3x plus 9 divided by 3x plus 2. You simplify further, you get x squared plus 6x plus 9 divided by 3x plus 2, and that's your final answer. Okay? Now, for division, it's a little bit different because we have to respect the reciprocal here. And we're doing some of the same steps, except we're flipping the second portion completely over and making sure we don't have to factor anything. So we have x minus 3 divided by 3 times the quantity of x squared plus 5. Multiply x squared plus 5 over x minus 3, right? This cancels, and then this cancels, and I'm left with 1 at the top. This simplifies to 1 over 3. Over here, I have to factor what's the top, flip the second fraction. I'm left with x plus minus 2 times x minus 1 on the left. On the bottom, 4x squared. And then over here, I'm pulling out a negative. This becomes negative 1. That becomes positive x. So I'm going to write this negative 1 times the quantity of, so just to be clarified what I just did, negative times negative 1 plus x, right? And I'm just going to flip it around so the x comes first. So x minus 1 divided by 2. So anytime we're approached with a negative x, we want to factor out a negative 1, okay? And change all the signs of each term inside of the parentheses. Now we're at a place where we can simplify this information. So I kind of made a mistake here. Because we're dividing, that should have gone to the bottom. So 2 goes up top. This becomes negative 1 times x minus 1. Now we can cancel x minus 1s. We can cancel this and make it a 2. 2/4 simplifies to 1 over 2. And then I have x minus 2 divided by 2x squared as my final answer. Number 20, I have 2x divided by 3x minus 12. And if you notice this big dividing bar here, right? Well, it's just similar to the other part. We're going to switch this to the top and this goes to the bottom. But first, I want to factor things out before I get started. So I'm going to just rewrite everything over here. I have 2x divided by 3 parentheses x minus 4 on the top. And then I have that big dividing line that suggests that my fractions are going to be flipped so I can multiply these things. And then I have x times the quantity of x minus 2. And then I have x minus 4 times x minus 2. Okay? Now I'm ready to put this in the form that works. Okay? So 2x divided by 3 times x minus 4. And remember, when you're dividing a fraction by a fraction, the second fraction or the bottom fraction flips. So times x minus 4, the factored form, x minus 2, over x times x minus 2. Simplified, these cancel, these expressions cancel, and I'm left with 2x over 3. Such a big expression and a small simplified answer. Next, I got so many things to factor. So I have up here x minus 7 times x plus 2. On the bottom, my factors are x minus 7 times x plus 1. And then I'm just going to put this over 1 so I don't make mistakes. I have x minus 5 times x plus 1 over 1. And lastly, I have, I'm going to flip this over completely. So this goes up top, this goes on the bottom. And I'm just going to go ahead and factor it here. So x, let's see, factors for 30. I have 3 and 10. And that adds up to -3 and -10 adds up to -13. 2 and 15 will not work. And I can't factor that particular expression. So I'm just going to write 2x over x squared plus x minus 30 on the bottom. Now, I'm going to go back and cancel out any expressions. This cancels. This x plus 1 cancels. And I'm left with parentheses x plus 2 times x minus 5 times 2x. I'm not going to ask that you simplify this any further. And then on the bottom I have x squared plus x minus 30. And here is your final answer. If you can prove otherwise, I will give you 3 extra points on the next test. If you can prove otherwise, that number 21 has a more simplified form that does not include decimals, are complex numbers directly, I will give you, I said 3 extra points on the next test. That could mean a very big lot. So that's all you have for today. Please do the homework for this particular lesson. Have a good day.